Tonight, we journey to a time when a great nation was only a fragile idea. Close your eyes as we begin a 7-part chronicle of survival in the unyielding spirit of a people searching for home. From the harsh shores of Jamestown to the thundering cannons of the Revolution, we follow the ordinary farmers and brilliant leaders who built a republic from hope and compromise. We will witness the struggle for equality, the roar of industrial innovation, and the global transformation of a young land. As the echoes of the past meet the horizons of tomorrow, we realize the journey of freedom never truly ends. Settle in, let the weight of history fade, and listen to the unfolding of American destiny. This is Echoes of Freedom, a chronicle of the early American colonies, from the arrival of diverse settlers, the clash of cultures with Native Americans, to the seeds of self-governance that ignited revolutionary thought. Long before the United States became a symbol of freedom and democracy, it existed only as an idea, fragile, uncertain, and slowly forming along the edges of a vast and unfamiliar land. The beginnings of the American nation can be traced to the early 17th century, when waves of settlers crossed the Atlantic Ocean, driven by hope, desperation, faith, and ambition. These men and women did not arrive with a unified vision of a country, yet their struggles and choices planted the earliest seeds of a nation that would one day reshape the world. The first permanent English settlement, Jamestown, was founded in 1607 in present-day Virginia. Life there was harsh and unforgiving. Disease, starvation, and conflict claimed more lives than prosperity saved. Many settlers arrived unprepared for the realities of the New World, expecting quick wealth rather than years of survival. Their survival depended heavily on the land and on the Native American tribes who had lived there for generations. Early cooperation, particularly with the Powhatan Confederacy, allowed the colony to endure, but mistrust and competition soon replaced fragile alliances. Further north, a different kind of settlement emerged. In 1620, the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth seeking religious freedom. Unlike Jamestown, their motivation was not profit but belief. They carried with them a vision of a godly community governed by shared values and mutual responsibility. Before stepping ashore, they signed the Mayflower Compact, an agreement to govern themselves through collective consent. Though modest in scope, this document marked a critical moment in history. It introduced the idea that legitimate power came not from kings, but from the people themselves. As more settlers arrived, the colonies began to take shape, each with its own character. New England colonies emphasized education, religion, and community governance. The middle colonies became centers of trade, cultural diversity, and relative tolerance. The southern colonies developed plantation economies dependent on agriculture, particularly tobacco, rice, and later cotton. This economic system would soon give rise to one of America's deepest moral contradictions, the institutionalization of slavery. Enslaved Africans were brought to the colonies against their will, forced into labor that fueled economic growth while denying them humanity and freedom. At the same time, Native American nations were increasingly pushed from their ancestral lands as colonial expansion accelerated. Treaties were broken, territories seized, and entire cultures disrupted. The foundations of America were laid alongside suffering and displacement, truths that would echo through the nation's future struggles. Despite their differences, the colonies shared a growing distance from British authority. The Atlantic Ocean separated them not only physically but politically. Over time, colonists grew accustomed to managing their own affairs through local assemblies and town meetings. Governors appointed by the crown often held limited power compared to elected colonial leaders. This quiet independence fostered a sense of autonomy long before rebellion was openly discussed. Ideas also played a powerful role. Enlightenment philosophy spread through books, sermons, and conversations. Thinkers like John Locke argued that governments existed to protect natural rights, life, liberty, and property, and that people had the right to resist tyranny. These ideas resonated deeply in the colonies, where daily life required self-reliance and cooperation rather than obedience to distant rulers. By the early 1700s, the colonies were no longer fragile outposts. They were growing societies with distinct identities, economies, and expectations. Generations had been born on American soil, viewing Britain as a homeland in name only. Loyalty to the crown remained, but it was increasingly conditional. Colonists believed their rights as Englishmen should be respected, and when those rights were threatened, resentment took root. The beginnings of the American nation were not marked by a single event, but by centuries of gradual change, of survival, conflict, compromise, and belief. Long before independence was declared, the foundations of American identity had already formed. It was an identity shaped by diversity and division, by hope and injustice, and by an unspoken conviction that ordinary people could govern themselves. From these early colonies emerged not just settlements, but a revolutionary idea that a nation could be built on the consent of the governed. That idea, born quietly in the New World, would soon challenge empires and alter the course of history forever. By the mid-18th century, the American colonies had matured from fragile settlements into thriving communities with their own distinct economies, cultures, and aspirations. Yet, despite this growth, tensions simmered beneath the surface. The colonists, accustomed to a degree of self-governance and local autonomy, began to chafe under the increasing interference of the British Crown. What had started as mild discontent would eventually ignite a fire of rebellion that would reshape the course of history. The roots of this tension were both economic and political. Britain, recovering from years of war, sought to maintain control over its colonies while also extracting revenue to pay off massive debts. Laws and taxes such as the Sugar Act of 1764 and the Stamp Act of 1765 imposed new financial burdens on the colonists. These acts required that paper goods, legal documents, newspapers, and even playing cards be taxed, often without the consent of the colonial assemblies. To the colonists, this was more than a financial nuisance. It was a violation of the principle that they should not be taxed without their own representation in government. The idea of taxation without representation became a rallying cry, echoing in taverns, meeting halls, and homes across the colonies. Pamphlets, speeches, and printed broadsides spread the argument that British policies were unjust, highlighting the inconsistency of demanding loyalty while denying political voice. Merchants organized boycotts of British goods, refusing to buy imported products and instead relying on locally produced alternatives. Women played a crucial role in these boycotts, spinning their own cloth and avoiding imported tea and fabrics, demonstrating that the resistance was truly a collective effort. Incidents of defiance escalated into dramatic confrontations. The most famous early example occurred in Boston in 1770, when tensions between British soldiers and colonial citizens erupted into violence. What became known as the Boston Massacre left 5 colonists dead and dozens wounded. Although a small event in scale, it was magnified through colonial newspapers and propaganda, fueling outrage and painting Britain as a tyrannical oppressor. Citizens began to see themselves not merely as loyal subjects, but as defenders of natural rights and liberties. The ideological foundations of rebellion were strengthened by the spread of Enlightenment ideas. Philosophers like John Locke and Montesquieu emphasized natural rights, the social contract, and the idea that legitimate governments existed to serve the people, not the other way around. These concepts resonated deeply in the colonies, where communities had long practiced local governance through town meetings, councils, and assemblies. The disconnect between British authority and colonial self-rule became increasingly intolerable. Leaders such as Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry began articulating a vision of liberty that demanded action, not mere complaint. Protests became more organized and widespread. Groups like the Sons of Liberty emerged, staging demonstrations, intimidating tax collectors, and even resorting to acts of property destruction, such as the infamous tarring and feathering of officials. In 1773, the Boston Tea Party shocked the world when American colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded British ships and dumped an entire shipment of tea into the harbor. This bold act of defiance was both symbolic and strategic. It directly challenged the authority of the crown and illustrated the colony's willingness to take radical steps in defense of their rights. British authorities responded with increasingly harsh measures known collectively as the Coercive Acts or Intolerable Acts. These laws closed Boston's port, limited local self-governance, and allowed British troops to be quartered in private homes. Rather than cowing the colonies into submission, these measures united them in shared indignation. Delegates from across the colonies convened in the First Continental Congress in 1774 to coordinate resistance, establish economic sanctions, and assert that their rights as Englishmen must be respected. The spark of rebellion was not simply a reaction to taxation or law, it was a profound cultural shift. Colonists began to see themselves as a distinct people with shared interests, bound by ideals of liberty, justice, and self-determination. Ordinary farmers, merchants, artisans, and women alike recognized that their collective actions could influence the course of history. The stage was set for an extraordinary transformation, an uprising that would challenge one of the most powerful empires in the world. By the end of the decade, the colonies had moved beyond protest into preparation for war. Militias trained in secret, arms were stockpiled, and leaders debated strategies for confronting an enemy that seemed invincible. Ideas that had once circulated quietly in pamphlets and sermons had crystallized into a conviction that rebellion was not only justified but necessary. What had begun as frustration over unfair taxation and laws had grown into a revolutionary movement shared by identity, ideology, and the unwavering belief in the right to self-government. The spark had been lit. From Boston's streets to the hills of Virginia, the message was clear. The American people would no longer tolerate oppression. They were prepared to fight, to sacrifice, and to forge a new nation built on the principles of liberty, equality, and justice. The American Revolution was no longer a distant possibility. It was inevitable. And so the colonies stood at the threshold of history, ready to ignite a war that would echo across the world and define the destiny of a new nation. The War for Independence was not born in a single moment. It was the culmination of years of tension, resentment, and ideological awakening. By the mid-1770s, the 13 American colonies were united in their determination to resist the impositions of the British Crown, yet the path to freedom was anything but simple. Ordinary men and women, farmers and tradesmen, merchants and artisans found themselves swept into a struggle that demanded extraordinary courage and sacrifice. The story of the war is as much about the unyielding will of the people as it is about the leadership of the founding figures whose names would echo through history. When the first shots rang out at Lexington and Concord in April 1775, they marked the transition from protest to open conflict. The shot heard round the world symbolized more than a local skirmish. It was the spark that ignited a revolution. Local militias, often untrained and poorly armed, faced off against British regulars with remarkable bravery. Ordinary farmers carried muskets alongside their plows, knowing that the defense of their homes, families, and ideals demanded every ounce of courage. From these early clashes emerged a sense of collective purpose that would carry the colonies through the long, grueling years of war. Leadership played a pivotal role in shaping the course of the Revolution. George Washington, appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, embodied the qualities of resilience, strategic foresight, and moral authority. He faced a daunting challenge: an inexperienced army confronting the world's most powerful military force. Yet Washington's leadership inspired loyalty and discipline, instilling hope where despair might have taken hold. The Continental Army endured freezing winters, scarce supplies, and repeated defeats, yet their determination never wavered. The contributions of other key figures were equally vital. Benjamin Franklin worked tirelessly as a diplomat, securing French support that proved crucial to the war effort. His charm, intellect, and tireless negotiation opened doors to funding, military assistance, and international legitimacy for the fledgling nation. Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and other leaders were crafting the philosophical foundation of independence, ensuring that the struggle was not merely military, but also ideological, a fight to create a nation built on liberty and self-governance. The battles themselves were brutal and demanding. From the icy campaigns in New York to the strategic engagements in the South, every confrontation tested the mettle of soldiers and civilians alike. The winter at Valley Forge in 1777 to 1778 exemplified the hardships endured by the Continental Army. Starvation, disease, and freezing temperatures claimed lives, yet the soldiers persevered. Their survival and eventual revival, aided by rigorous training and the guidance of leaders like Baron von Steuben, transformed an untrained militia into a disciplined fighting force capable of standing against professional soldiers. The war was not fought by soldiers alone. Women, enslaved Africans, Native Americans, and ordinary citizens contributed in countless ways. Women managed households, farms, and businesses in the absence of men, often supplying troops with food, clothing, and medical care. Some, like Molly Pitcher, even took to the battlefield. Enslaved Africans, some promised freedom for their service, demonstrated that the quest for liberty carried a complex and often painful dimension. Native American tribes were divided, with allegiances influenced by survival and long-standing grievances, reflecting the complicated social fabric of the colonies. Victory did not come quickly. Battles like Saratoga in 1777 and Yorktown in 1781 became turning points, illustrating the importance of strategy, international alliances, and the indomitable spirit of the American forces. Saratoga's success convinced France to enter the war openly, providing troops, ships, and resources that shifted the balance of power. The final siege of Yorktown, supported by French naval forces, forced British surrender, signaling the effective end of the war and validating years of struggle, sacrifice, and perseverance. The War for Independence was transformative not only in creating a new nation, but in shaping a national identity. Ordinary people became heroes through acts of bravery and commitment, and their sacrifices laid the foundation for a country grounded in ideals of liberty, equality, and civic responsibility. The leadership of Washington, Franklin, Jefferson, and others was essential, yet it was the courage of countless unnamed individuals, farmers, blacksmiths, mothers, and children that gave the revolution its heart and its soul. The legacy of the war extended far beyond the battlefield.
It demonstrated that ordinary citizens could unite for a common cause, challenge a mighty empire, and emerge victorious. It created a blueprint for governance rooted in the consent of the governed, inspiring movements for freedom around the world. Above all, it affirmed that a nation is not merely defined by its borders or armies, but the convictions, sacrifices, and unwavering determination of its people. In the end, the War for Independence was not simply a chapter in a textbook. It was a testament to resilience, courage, and the enduring human desire for freedom. From the first spark at Lexington and Concord to the final surrender at Yorktown, the Revolution was a journey of collective struggle and extraordinary resolve. It was a war fought not just with muskets and cannons, but with ideas, ideals, and the unbreakable spirit of a people determined to define their own destiny.
The conclusion of the Revolutionary War marked not only a victory on the battlefield, but the beginning of an even greater challenge: building a nation from 13 independent and diverse colonies. Each colony had developed its own economy, laws, and political culture over decades, and now they faced the enormous task of uniting under a single government. The creation of the United States was not inevitable. It required vision, compromise, and the determination of leaders and citizens alike to shape a republic founded on principles that had been fought for during the Revolution. In the immediate aftermath of independence, the fledgling states operated under the Articles of Confederation, the first attempt at a national framework. While the Articles established a loose alliance, it quickly became clear that a stronger, more cohesive government was necessary. The central authority lacked the power to levy taxes, regulate trade, or maintain a standing army. States often acted in their own interests, sometimes clashing with neighbors, and the sense of unity that had fueled the revolution began to waver. This period, often called the critical period, exposed the fragility of a nation built solely on shared ideals without practical governance structures. Recognizing the need for a more effective system, delegates from 12 of the 13 states convened in Philadelphia in 1787 for what would become the Constitutional Convention. The task before them was monumental: to craft a government that balanced the sovereignty of individual states with the necessity of national unity, that protected liberty without descending into chaos, and that created a structure capable of enduring the pressures of a diverse and growing population. The debates were intense, the disagreements profound, and the stakes unprecedented. Every decision carried the weight of history. One of the most contentious issues was representation. Large states favored proportional representation based on population, while smaller states demanded equal representation to ensure their voices would not be drowned out. The resulting Great Compromise established a bicameral legislature, creating the House of Representatives to reflect population and the Senate to guarantee equal state representation. This delicate balance embodied the spirit of compromise that would define the Constitution and preserve the fragile unity of the new nation. Slavery, an issue that would haunt the Republic for decades, also loomed over the discussions.
Southern states sought to count enslaved people for representation, while northern states opposed it. The controversial 3/5 compromise emerged, allowing a portion of enslaved populations to be counted for legislative representation. Though morally troubling, it was a practical decision intended to secure ratification and maintain fragile cohesion. These debates revealed the inherent tensions between liberty and inequality that the new nation would struggle with for generations. The Constitution also established a system of checks and balances, dividing power among executive, legislative, and judicial branches. This structure was designed to prevent tyranny and ensure that no single branch could dominate, reflecting the lessons of the Revolution and the colonists' fear of concentrated authority. The Bill of Rights, added shortly after ratification, further guaranteed fundamental liberties such as freedom of speech, religion, and assembly, cementing the nation's commitment to individual rights while balancing collective governments. Ratifying the Constitution was no simple task. Federalists who supported a strong central government faced staunch opposition from anti-federalists who feared that centralized power might replicate the very tyranny they had fought to escape. Through impassioned debates, essays, and public discourse, most famously the Federalist Papers, the principles and vision of the Constitution were articulated to the American people. By 1789, the document had been ratified by the required 9 states, and the United States of America officially became a republic. The early years of the republic were marked by experimentation and learning. George Washington's presidency set precedents for leadership, civic responsibility, and peaceful transfer of power. Political parties began to form, reflecting differences in philosophy and policy, yet these debates occurred within the framework of a constitution designed to endure. The young nation faced economic challenges, regional tensions, and the constant task of translating lofty ideals into practical governments. Still, a commitment to a government of the people, by the people, for the people, held firm. The birth of the Republic was a triumph of vision, courage, and compromise. It demonstrated that a diverse collection of states, each with its own identity and priorities, could unite under shared principles of liberty, equality, and democracy. The Constitution became not just a governing document, but a symbol of the nation's aspirations, a blueprint for balancing order and freedom, unity and diversity. It showed that freedom required not only victory in war, but careful deliberation, compromise, and institutions capable of sustaining the ideals for which Americans had fought. In hindsight, the creation of the United States was a monumental achievement. The trials of uniting disparate states, crafting a functional government, and protecting fundamental rights set a precedent for governance around the world. Yet the story of the Republic's birth reminds us that democracy is never static. It requires participation, vigilance, and an ongoing commitment to the principles that define it. The early republic was fragile, imperfect, and full of challenges, but it was a testament to what a people could achieve when united by shared purpose, vision, and the enduring hope of building a nation rooted in liberty and justice for all.
The promise of freedom in America was born alongside a profound contradiction. While the nation declared that all men are created equal, millions of people were denied that very right. The early republic struggled with the paradox of liberty, a society founded on ideals of freedom, yet built on the labor and oppression of enslaved Africans. The struggle for equality would span generations, leaving an indelible mark on the nation's history and identity. Slavery had deep roots in the American colonies. From the 17th century onward, African men, women, and children were brought forcibly to work on plantations, producing the wealth that fueled the Southern economy. These enslaved individuals were considered property, stripped of basic human rights, and subjected to brutal conditions. Despite this oppression, enslaved people maintained their dignity, culture, and resistance. They ran clandestine schools, organized escapes, and forged networks like the Underground Railroad, refusing to let the hope for freedom die. The moral and political tension over slavery escalated as the United States expanded westward. New states and territories sparked heated debates over whether slavery would be allowed, revealing the fragility of the Union. Compromises, such as the Missouri Compromise, attempted to balance free and slave states, yet these agreements merely postponed the inevitable confrontation. Slavery was no longer a regional issue. It had become a national crisis that threatened the survival of the Republic itself. The 19th century saw a growing abolitionist movement as voices like Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, William Lloyd Garrison, and Harriet Tubman galvanized public opinion. Through speeches, writings, and direct action, they exposed the moral horror of slavery and called for emancipation. Ordinary citizens, both black and white, risked their lives to support the cause, participating in anti-slavery societies, aiding fugitives, and challenging the institutions that perpetuated injustice. This activism laid the ideological groundwork for a broader understanding of human rights in the United States. Tensions erupted into the Civil War in 1861, a conflict that would determine the nation's future and the fate of millions. Brother fought against brother, communities were divided, and the battlefield became the arena where the question of equality would finally be confronted. The sacrifices were staggering. Lives lost, families torn apart, and cities left in ruin. Yet the war also marked a turning point. The Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 declared the freedom of enslaved people in Confederate-held territories, signaling a new commitment to the principle that liberty should not be selective. Even with the end of the war and the ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the struggle for equality was far from over. Reconstruction promised political participation, civil rights, and social advancement for formerly enslaved people, but systemic resistance and violence quickly undermined progress. The
The rise of Jim Crow laws in the South enforced segregation, denying African Americans access to education, voting rights, and fair employment. The ideals of freedom clashed starkly with reality, as legal equality existed on paper but often failed in practice. The 20th century brought renewed momentum in the fight for civil rights. Grassroots movements, legal challenges, and courageous individuals demanded the nation live up to its founding principles. Figures such as Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, and countless unnamed activists challenged injustice through nonviolent protest, civil disobedience, and advocacy. Landmark legislation, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, began to dismantle institutional barriers, reflecting a hard-won progress toward true equality. Yet the struggle continues even today. Social, economic, and political disparities persist, reminding the nation that freedom is a continuous endeavor rather than a static achievement. Each generation confronts its own challenges, seeking to expand the promise of liberty to all citizens, regardless of race, gender, religion, or background. The road toward equality has been long, painful, and fraught with setbacks, but it has also been shaped by perseverance, courage, and the enduring belief in the ideals of justice and human dignity. The American story of equality is inseparable from the experiences of those who fought, suffered, and hoped for a better future. From enslaved Africans and abolitionists to civil rights leaders and modern advocates, the narrative is one of resilience in the face of injustice. It is a testament to the nation's capacity for reflection, reform, and renewal. Each step toward equality has not only expanded individual rights, but has also strengthened the moral foundation of the Republic. Ultimately, the struggle for equality reminds Americans that liberty is not merely a privilege of the few, but a responsibility of the many. The nation's history demonstrates that freedom is never fully realized without vigilance, empathy, and collective action. The story of America is thus one of constant striving, of confronting contradictions, acknowledging past failures, and working tirelessly to ensure that the ideals of justice and equality are more than just words on parchment, but guiding principles that shape the lived experience of every citizen. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the United States was undergoing a profound transformation. From a fledgling nation of farmers and frontier settlers, it began evolving into an industrial powerhouse, reshaping its economy, society, and global influence. This era of transformation and innovation reflected the dynamism of a country that had survived revolution, civil war, and internal struggles, now poised to emerge as a modern nation on the world stage. Industrialization became the defining force of this period. Factories sprouted across the Northeast, powered by coal, steam, and eventually electricity. Cities like Pittsburgh, Chicago, and Detroit became hubs of production, fueling railroads, steel, textiles, and machinery that connected the nation like never before. The rise of industry brought unprecedented wealth, but it also introduced new challenges. Laborers toiled for long hours in often dangerous conditions, sparking strikes and the formation of unions. Figures such as Samuel Gompers and Eugene V. Debs emerged as champions of workers' rights, negotiating for fair wages, safer workplaces, and the recognition of labor as a crucial element of national progress. Alongside industrial growth, the United States experienced a dramatic westward expansion. The promise of land, opportunity, and prosperity drew settlers across the Appalachian Mountains and onto the Great Plains. Railroads, notably the Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, made travel and commerce possible on an unprecedented scale, knitting together disparate regions and facilitating trade and migration. However, this expansion often came at a high cost to Native American communities. Tribal lands were seized, treaties broken, and traditional ways of life disrupted, reflecting the complicated balance between progress and its human consequences. Immigration was another transformative force. Waves of immigrants arrived from Europe, Asia, and beyond, seeking refuge, work, and the chance to build a better life. Cities like New York, Boston, and San Francisco became cultural mosaics filled with the sounds, languages, and traditions of newcomers. Immigrants provided the labor that fueled factories, railroads, and farms, while also enriching American culture with diverse perspectives, culinary traditions, and artistic expressions. Yet assimilation was not always easy, and newcomers often faced discrimination, poverty, and harsh working conditions. Their perseverance, however, helped shape the social fabric of the modern United States. Innovation, both technological and cultural, defined this era. Inventors like Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, and Henry Ford revolutionized communication, transportation, and manufacturing. The telephone connected distant cities. The automobile transformed daily life and urban planning, and assembly line production increased efficiency and accessibility. Scientific advancements, public education, and cultural institutions nurtured creativity and knowledge, establishing the United States as a place where ideas could flourish and dreams could take tangible form. The nation's transformation was tested and solidified through global conflict. Participation in World War I demonstrated the United States' growing influence on international affairs. American soldiers, resources, and industrial capacity were crucial to the Allied victory, signaling that the country was no longer a distant observer, but a key player in global politics. The interwar period brought economic growth, innovation, and social change, though it also introduced challenges such as the Great Depression. The New Deal programs of the 1930s reflected the government's evolving role in stabilizing the economy, providing social support, and investing in public infrastructure. World War II further solidified the United States' status as a global power. Factories once devoted to consumer goods were repurposed to produce weapons, vehicles, and supplies, demonstrating the country's industrial might. American soldiers fought across Europe, Africa, and the Pacific, while scientific innovation, epitomized by the Manhattan Project, reshaped the world in profound ways. The war accelerated technological progress, spurred economic growth, and positioned the United States as a leader on the global stage, shaping foreign policy and international alliances for decades to come. Culturally, this period of transformation fostered innovation in art, literature, music, and entertainment. Jazz, cinema, radio, and later television became powerful mediums that reflected and influenced American life. Cities pulsated with energy, while rural areas adapted to technological changes that connected them to the wider world. Education expanded, and public institutions supported research, creativity, and civic engagement. The country's identity evolved, blending tradition with modernity, individuality with community, and freedom with responsibility. Through industrialization, westward expansion, immigration, and global influence, the United States was reshaped into a nation capable of remarkable resilience and innovation. Yet this transformation was not without tension. Social inequities, environmental challenges, and political debates tested the nation's values even as it grew stronger. The lessons of this era emphasized the need for balance between progress and justice, innovation and ethics, growth and sustainability. Ultimately, the story of transformation and innovation is a testament to the American spirit. It illustrates a nation willing to take risks, embrace change, and harness creativity to solve problems and expand opportunities. From the factories and railroads of the 19th century to the laboratories and battlefields of the 20th century, the United States demonstrated that progress is not merely about wealth or power, but about the ability to adapt, innovate, and create a society in which ideas, effort, and determination can flourish. This period laid the foundation for modern America, a nation defined by its ingenuity, resilience, and global vision, a story of transformation that continues to evolve with each generation. Reflection on America's role on the world stage, ongoing quests for justice, innovation, and identity, tracing how past struggles inform present aspirations and tomorrow's challenges. As the United States entered the 21st century, it found itself standing on the shoulders of centuries of struggle, innovation, and transformation. The story of America is a tapestry woven from the triumphs and tragedies of its past, a nation forged in revolution, refined through conflict, and continually reshaped by the ideals of liberty and opportunity. Today, the legacy of that journey informs its place on the global stage, its ongoing quest for justice, and its vision for the future. America's role in global affairs has evolved dramatically over the centuries. From its earliest days as a fledgling republic, it has transitioned from an isolated collection of states into a leading world power. Its military, economic, and diplomatic influence has played a pivotal role in shaping international events, from supporting allies in World War II to responding to humanitarian crises and fostering international trade. This global presence carries both responsibility and scrutiny, as the nation is continually called upon to balance its interests with moral and ethical imperatives, a challenge rooted in the principles of justice and liberty that guided its founding. Yet, the United States' legacy is not defined solely by its international achievements. It is also a story of internal reflection, a nation wrestling with the contradictions between its ideals and its realities. The ongoing quests for equality, civil rights, and social justice reflect a deep understanding that freedom is a continuous journey rather than a final destination. The struggles of the past, from the abolition of slavery to the civil rights movement, from women's suffrage to LGBTQ+ advocacy, have shaped a collective consciousness that demands inclusivity, fairness, and accountability in every generation. These movements remind citizens that the promise of democracy requires vigilance, courage, and participation. Innovation remains a central thread in the fabric of American identity. The nation has long been a laboratory of ideas, a place where ambition meets ingenuity. From the Industrial Revolution to the digital age, Americans have continually pushed boundaries, challenging what is possible in science, technology, art, and culture. This spirit of innovation not only drives economic growth, but also shapes society's ability to confront pressing global challenges, from climate change to public health crises, reinforcing the nation's reputation as a leader in creativity and problem solving. Equally important is the evolving sense of American identity. The United States is a diverse mosaic of cultures, languages, and experiences. Waves of immigration, cultural exchange, and social progress have continuously redefined what it means to be American. This diversity has been a source of strength, fostering resilience, adaptability, and a wealth of perspectives that enrich the national character. Yet it also presents ongoing challenges, requiring dialogue, compromise, and empathy to bridge differences and ensure that all citizens can participate fully in the democratic experiment. The lessons of history are crucial in guiding the nation forward. Each struggle, each victory, and each failure offers insights into the responsibilities of citizenship, the limits of power, and the importance of principled leadership. The experiences of past generations, those who fought for independence, challenged injustice, and built institutions from scratch, serve as both inspiration and warning. They underscore the importance of defending the rule of law, nurturing civic engagement, and committing to the ideals of equality and opportunity for all. Looking ahead, America faces complex challenges and exciting possibilities. Technological advancement continues to reshape economies, societies, and communication, demanding adaptability and ethical foresight. Environmental sustainability, global interconnectedness, and social equity require forward-thinking policies and collaboration across borders. At the same time, the nation must address internal divisions, economic disparities, and the evolving nature of civic responsibility. How Americans navigate these issues will determine whether the country can live up to the promise established centuries ago. Despite these challenges, the horizon is filled with potential. America's legacy is not fixed, it is dynamic, shaped by the actions, decisions, and ideals of its citizens. The enduring principles of freedom, innovation, and equality provide a compass, guiding efforts to create a society that is just, prosperous, and inclusive. As new generations take the reins, they inherit not only the accomplishments of the past, but also its responsibilities to preserve liberty, expand opportunity, and confront injustices wherever they persist. Ultimately, the story of legacy and future horizons is a testament to the resilience and vision of the American people. It is a reminder that a nation's greatness is measured not only by its power or wealth, but by its ability to learn from history, uphold its ideals, and adapt to an ever-changing world. By reflecting on its past struggles, celebrating its achievements, and embracing its responsibilities, the United States continues to chart a course towards a future shaped by justice, innovation, and a commitment to the enduring principles that define its identity. In this way, America stands as both a product of history and a beacon for the future. Its journey demonstrates that freedom, equality, and opportunity are not static achievements, but ongoing endeavors. The nation's past provides guidance, its present offers opportunity, and its future depends on the choices, courage, and collective vision of its people. Through reflection, action, and perseverance, the United States continues to fulfill the promise of a nation that aspires to lead, inspire, and embody the enduring ideals of liberty and justice for all.